The Night of Fire. John Basilone at Guadalcanal. At 9:30 p.m. on October 24, 1942, Sergeant Ralph Briggs lifted a field telephone on a muddy ridge, 3,000 yards south of Henderson Field. On the other end of the line was Lieutenant Colonel Louis Chesty Puller, commander of the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, one of the most respected and feared officers in the Marine Corps. Briggs and his 46 men had been sitting in the dark jungle for hours, serving as an observation post. The night was pitch black, soaked by intermittent rain, and the air was thick and suffocating. Every noise, the rustle of leaves, the croak of frogs, the distant rumble of artillery, seemed amplified. Then Briggs heard something new: human voices. Dozens at first, then hundreds. The sound of men moving through the jungle. When he picked up the phone again, his voice was urgent. "Colonel, there's about 3,000 Japs between you and me." Puller asked if he was sure. "Positive," Briggs replied. The warning gave Puller barely 30 minutes to prepare his battalion before an estimated 3,000 soldiers of Japan's Sendai Division would strike the southern defensive line protecting Henderson Field, the airfield that had become the key to control of Guadalcanal and, possibly, the Pacific. The Marines had about 11,000 men defending the airfield, joined by recently arrived Army reinforcements. Facing them were 20,000 Japanese soldiers under Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake, who had spent weeks maneuvering his 17th Army into position for what Tokyo expected to be the decisive battle of the Pacific War. Among the Marines bracing for the assault was a 26-year-old sergeant from Raritan, New Jersey, John Basilone.
Basilone had arrived on Guadalcanal on September 18, a veteran of both the Army and the Marines. The son of Italian immigrants, he had grown up in a large working-class family and left school after the 8th grade. At 17, restless and seeking adventure, he enlisted in the Army and served 3 years in the Philippines, where he became a skilled boxer known as Manila John. After his discharge, civilian life felt empty, and in 1940 he joined the Marine Corps, believing it would get him back to the Philippines faster. The Marines quickly recognized his experience and technical mastery of the M1917 water-cooled heavy machine gun, a weapon that required both strength and precision to handle. By 1942, he was leading a machine gun section in Company D, 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. His job that night was simple in theory, but nearly impossible in practice: hold the line. The stakes at Guadalcanal. The struggle for Guadalcanal had begun 2.5 months earlier. In August 1942, U.S. Marines landed on the island to seize an unfinished Japanese airfield that threatened Allied supply routes to Australia. The landing was part of Operation Watchtower, hastily organized by Admiral Ernest J. King. Despite being untested and undertrained, the Marines captured the airfield with little resistance and renamed it Henderson Field, after Major Lofton Henderson, a Marine aviator killed at Midway. From that moment, the Japanese fought relentlessly to reclaim it. Reinforcements arrived nightly on fast destroyers in what the Marines called the Tokyo Express. The Japanese fought ferociously, but were repeatedly repelled. First at the Battle of the Tanaru River in August, where Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki's 900 men were annihilated, and then at Edson's Ridge in September, where Major General Kawaguchi's 6,000 troops were thrown back in a 2-day slaughter.
By October, the Japanese were determined to end it. General Hyakutake moved his headquarters forward from Rabaul and ordered heavy artillery, including 150mm howitzers, to be carried through the jungle piece by piece. On October 14th, 2 battleships, Kongo and Haruna, shelled Henderson Field for an hour and a half, firing nearly 1,000 14-inch shells. The bombardment flattened aircraft, fuel dumps, and supply depots. Japanese confidence soared. Officers were already drafting plans for an American surrender ceremony to be held on the captured airfield. Hyakutake's plan called for a diversionary assault across the Matanikau River on the island's west, while the main force, Lieutenant Colonel Masao Maruyama's Sendai Division, would attack from the south through miles of brutal jungle. The terrain was so dense and swampy that the Japanese underestimated their distance to the American lines by half. Exhausted, starving, and drenched by tropical rains, they still believed that sheer willpower and the Emperor's blessing would carry them to victory. The calm before the storm. Lieutenant Colonel Puller's battalion occupied the southern sector of the perimeter, where the jungle pressed close against the Marine lines. His 1,000 men held ground meant for 3 times that number. They had dug shallow foxholes and machine gun emplacements, strung barbed wire, and cut fields of fire through the vegetation. But their defenses were thin. Basilone's 2 machine gun sections, 6 M1917s in total, were the backbone of this sector. The Marines were in poor shape. Food was scarce, and malaria had sickened half the men. Feverish and weak, they still refused to leave their posts. Supplies arrived only when the Navy could slip ships past Japanese control. Yet morale, hardened by months of battle, remained unbroken. They knew that if the line collapsed, Henderson Field would fall, and with it, the entire campaign.
The battle began. The first wave came screaming bull's-eye as it charged the ridge. Basilone's guns opened up in unison, the heavy .30 caliber machine guns roaring in steady rhythm. Tracer rounds cut glowing arcs through the night. The Japanese front ranks were shredded before they reached the wire, collapsing in heaps that tripped those behind them. But more kept coming. The Marines fired until the barrels of their guns glowed red. Basilone moved constantly, shouting orders, clearing jams and feeding belts into red-hot guns. When one crew was wiped out by a mortar shell, he dragged a spare gun into position himself, set it up under fire, and kept shooting. Steam rose from the water-cooled barrels as they churned through belt after belt of ammunition. The second wave broke as brutally as the first, but the Japanese regrouped and came again, pressing against the thin Marine line from multiple directions. Casualties mounted. 2 of Basilone's 6 guns were destroyed. Ammunition was running dangerously low. If the machine guns went silent, the Japanese would pour through to Henderson Field. Basilone made a decision few would have dared. Leaving his position in the middle of the fight, he ran back through the jungle alone to the ammunition dump 150 yards behind the line. He carried his .45 pistol, knowing enemy infiltrators were already inside the perimeter. He sprinted through mud and darkness, past Japanese soldiers who had slipped through the wire. He loaded himself with 90 pounds of ammunition, belts slung over his shoulders, cans in both hands, and ran back through the chaos. He made that run not once, but 4 times during the night. Each time he carried more ammunition through enemy-held jungle. Each time he returned to his guns and kept them firing. On his second run, he encountered a Japanese infiltration party crouched by a log, trying to flank the Marine line.